What is life? Why am I here? How is it all connected? And how am I going to navigate this beautiful but crazy journey? I'm Sylvia and welcome to the Soul Sunshine Podcast. Today I'm talking to Marieke. Although Marieke was always drawing and painting, it was while living in Australia when she quit her day job to be a professional illustrator. Living in Bondi, she created magic and change-making illustrations as well as video content for clients like the Climate Change Council, WWF, the Benevolent Society, the City of Sydney and many more. Combining her passions for change-making, storytelling and creativity, Marieke is also an experienced marketing manager and public speaker for sustainable brands. Although a permanent resident of Australia, she currently lives with her husband Lars and toddler Finn in Amsterdam. Marieke is the best-selling illustrator and author from the Big Depri book that she published in 2020. Her mission is to create hope, share wisdom and optimistic change backed in pretty illustrations. Welcome to the Soul Sunshine Podcast,
Wow.
Marieke. It's so awesome to have you here
Thank you
today.
for the beautiful introduction, Sylvia. So nice to speak to you again.
What an intro.
Yeah, I know. It's a mouthful.
Love it. It is a mouthful, it is. Oh, I can't believe we've made it. We had to reschedule a few times due to other arrangements that we've both had and sicknesses. So I'm really, really happy that we finally made it today. And it's late in the evening.
It's early morning here in Amsterdam.
It's early morning in
Amsterdam.
Exactly.
Winter here, cold. Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about Marieke's journey from a marketing executive to leaving her corporate career and finding her purpose as an illustrator in the change-making community in Sydney. Being a sought-after illustrator, killing life on the outside, it was when she was happiest that a burnout slowed her right down and made her relearn the most important things in life again. We talk about her move back to Amsterdam, her work on herself, and how she came out the other end stronger than before. We are also talking about her best-selling book that is now supporting others to go through a rough time. So Marieke, I was thinking about when we met and I was like, well, we used to be colleagues.
Exactly.
And I miss you. I'm like, oh my God, it feels like yesterday when you were still in Sydney and we were still working together, and it's been a few years now. But yeah, so we met through Digital Storytellers, working together there. And it's been about 9 years ago, I think. Like
I
crazy.
know. But it's partly because of you and your team and the Digital Storytellers that I actually found myself or gained the trust to quit my day job and become a full-time illustrator. So yeah, partly because of you, I am where I am right now. So that's beautiful.
I know, that's amazing. And we're going to go into that a little bit. I guess we can just jump straight into the conversation. Marieke, just for our listeners, I guess, to get to know you a little bit, maybe just tell us a little bit about your background. You know, we know you're from Amsterdam now. We know you lived in Sydney. Why did you move to Sydney? What brought you to Australia? And just tell us a little bit about that backstory of yours.
Okay, well, that's a fun thing to do. Oh, hello, everybody. Hi, Sylvia. you might not even know everything. I'm Marieke, and I kind of think I'm like an enthusiastic adventurer, and especially on life. Like always when I found myself intrigued by something or passionate about something, I dove right in. And even when I found myself scared of something, I thought, okay, this is what I have to do. So I liked traveling the world, and even while living in Amsterdam and working for sustainable brands, I worked for a chocolate company here called Tony Sugar Lonely, which is getting more world famous by the minute actually, and also for Ben & Jerry's and other big sustainable brands. But I did think like, okay, but one day I want to move abroad. But one day abroad is kind of like a vague term. It's like, yeah, I don't want this job, but someday I'm going to change. Well, that really doesn't work because it keeps being tomorrow and someday, etc. So we thought, okay, we want to do this. Where are we going to go? And somehow we were sitting here in Amsterdam in the park and we thought, Australia, Sydney. I don't know where it came from, but it proved to be an...
You probably watched Nemo the night before or something like that.
Probably,
something
like that. But we kind of used, I mean, this is the Soul Sunshine podcast, so I can tell you, like, we kind of used the secret techniques from the book, The Secret. We just thought, me and my husband, Lars, we thought, okay, we're going to do it. We've decided. We're in the park. We've decided in 1.5 years, we will live in Sydney. And it happened. Like Lars found out that his boss, he worked at Red Bull energy drink back then. I had a good friend in Australia that was the CEO there of Red Bull. And everything started happening. But we worked on it for 1.5 years. But we were actually using our minds. We were like, we're already living there. Like I gave him the Lonely Planet of Sydney just to say, hey, let's pick out in which area we're going to live, where's the house going to be. We told our mom and dad. I told my mom, yes, in March I will be living in Sydney. Okay. So we just lived our lives in a sense that it's already true. And actually Lars asked me to get... Exactly, we manifested it. Lars actually even asked me to be his wife. So in the end, we didn't get a visa until like 6 weeks before that actual March. We got married on a mountain in Austria, where you're from, of course.
Austria,
yeah,
love it.
In our Austrian winter, in the snow. And 2 weeks later, we moved to Australia because we got a visa and we got a job and here we were. And I gotta say, like, I instantly fell in love. I actually believe that somehow there's a big part of me that's actually Aussie, I think. I still find it strange that although I love Amsterdam and Holland and my family here and my friends, I do feel that as a person, I felt very much at home in Australia and in Sydney. So for me, it was like a little Nemo getting in warm waters. Like, yo, this is cool, you know? So yeah, I loved it from the beginning.
Love it, yeah.
So that's how I ended up in Australia. And somehow I was very passionate. I mean, we are going to talk about how passion can get you down too. But I've always been very passionate to do what I love. And back then I loved at least making a difference. Like I've got so many skills, you know, I can tell stories. I studied psychology, but I became more of a master in the marketing. So psychology of marketing, and then using that for a better world. So using that in the sense that marketing, sometimes people think, oh, marketing is like a devil. But it's not. If you use it in a good way, you can actually promote people to do a good thing or buy the good stuff or use less energy, etc., etc. You know all about that, of course. So that's how I went on, and I looked for jobs and I found some. And at some point, I just started meeting a lot of people that were in the sustainable scene actually in Sydney, more and more. And I was actually planning on creating an own business. And on the backside of that, I was always drawing and illustrating. Like somewhere in me, it was... Now I know on the inside I'm just a creative. I've never been anything else. But because I studied psychology at the university and didn't go to art school, it was kind of like in my head, oh yeah, well, now I can work with advertising agencies. And there are some people there that are creative, officially. But I'm not that person because I never chose to study that. I know that's complete bullshit. Can I say that on this podcast?
Yeah, you can. And I can personally vouch for the fact that you are probably one of the most creative people I've ever met. Like, you're amazing. So
thank you.
Yeah.
But somehow it took me to move to the farthest edge side of the world, to restart, to have nothing to lose, and to reinvent yourself. And sometimes that's so much easier to do in a different country when no one knows you, you don't know the social ranks, you don't know what kind of college or university or whatever anyone went to. And also the Australian spirit. So I got there and I had all these different plans on my head. Like I worked a 3-day corporate job to be able to pay the rent. And then I had 2 days where I was trying to start my own startup in sustainable sunscreen, actually.
I remember those days, yes.
Yeah. And somehow I met, Pete and Marieke, that you also know from Digital Storytellers. And I went to all these events, like 3 times a week. There was some event about climate change or water, and I went there and I started drawing my own notes. And also like on day 3, because when I went to Australia, like I knew no one. I had not even one person to drink coffee with, which is kind of weird. And I was kind of in the outskirts, or not in the outskirts, but I was in Alexandria where not a lot was happening. It's more like where the businesses were. And on day 3, I booked a drawing course, like a comic drawing course in Roselle, some kind of community center. Like there were only people there they were either unemployed or retired, and that was me. And then but I thought I'm going to keep something alive. And when I was going through all the meetings and about the water and the climate change, I thought, okay, how can I keep my creativity alive or keep busy? I'm going to draw all my notes. So instead of writing my notes, I just made illustrations and drawings, and it was just for fun. And at some point, Pete and Marieke saw it, and they were filming in the back at an event from Avis, Mohal, and well, the rest was history. They said, whoa, that's amazing. I'm like, no, that's just my ugly notes. No. And 2 weeks later, they called. We need an illustrator. Our illustrator, I don't know, fell ill or something, or they was gone. We need an illustrator. We think you can do it. And I was like, And that's when I remembered Pippi Longstocking, I think you call it in English, where she says...
Yeah, Pippi Langstrumpf, yeah.
Yeah, Pippi Langstrumpf, yeah. I've never done it before, so I think I can do it. And I thought, okay, I've never done it before. This feels like scary, but hey, I'm in a different country. Yeah, of course I can do that. I'm going to illustrate your video. No idea. But it was a lot of fun, and it was good to do. And somehow I got more and more illustrating. It's like suddenly there was kind of like a boom in people wanting to show stories with visuals. So we made all these explainer videos where you hear someone talking like a voiceover, and you saw my hands, you saw drawing, and we were just freestyling. And at some point I remember talking to a friend, and he was giving me some marketing advice, and I was learning from him, and I said, oh, it's so annoying, and I need to create a startup, and now I'm getting all these illustrating assignments, and I can't do it all. And it's like I was almost annoyed. And he said, but wait a minute. What if you could quit your corporate job and earn your money with doing illustrations? It was like a light bulb went in my head, because in my head, you couldn't live off illustrating, you know? That's not something you could do. And then I thought, oh, that will be awesome. And somehow I just made that a goal. And within half a year, I quit the corporate job, and then I suddenly was a full-time illustrator.
I remember those late nights.
Yeah.
Drawing with you at the
I
hub.
know.
Yeah, it was good fun at the beginning.
It was good fun.
It was always fun, but yeah.
Yeah, late nights and just the settings were perfect, like the country and the enthusiasm and you guys, and we were in a sustainable scene where people making change, and it was perfect for reinventing yourself. But also the main thing is to believe in yourself, because it's mostly the patterns in your head that are against you sometimes. They're trying to protect you. They're not against you, but they're trying to protect you. So they would say, oh, you know, you didn't go to school for this. Who will believe you? You're an imposter. Now I know. Every time you start something new, you're going to think you're an imposter, and everyone has that. So it can speak, it can travel along, but it can't impact the choices I make for what I do.
It's like you're always your own worst critic.
Yes. And although always, I am quite far along on the path now, and we will speak about that, I'm sure, by the end of this podcast, I have been my crazy, very bad critic, completely tearing myself down. But now I'm learning every day, like that's my new journey, to try to be my own best friend. So try to see where that critic is trying to help me and trying to give him or her what she needs to feel safe. So actually, yeah, now that you mention it, I'm not that critical on myself anymore, or I am, like in a third instance. I feel the voice coming up, but then I say something sweet, or I give it a cup of tea. Instead of, no, you can't say that, instead of arguing with it, you know, and making it stronger. Exactly. I'm giving it like, yeah, I know that you're there. It's okay.
Love it.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah. So it's like you accepting that it's there, and you're not trying to push it away, but you're inviting it in, and then, you know, being able to work with it as well. Yeah. It can just sit next to me on the couch and say, hey, that's good. You're here too. You're cool. Here, look, I'm drawing. I know it might be ugly. That's okay. And it sounds easy now, but for me, I mean, that's actually that's the hardest thing. For me, that's the art of life kind of thing, you know? It's not so much making the art, but the living is what's, well, not hardest, but it's the most beautiful challenge. And to make a piece of art out of that, I think that's my main goal. And out of that, like out of seeing your own demons and learning to live my life the way I want it, and out of that I create books or cards or podcasts or whatever comes up, because sometimes other people can use a little bit of love or pretty illustrations or wisdom as well, I think. Yeah. And mostly I make it for myself, because one week you know it, the other week you forget it. So it's good to see your own wisdom in hindsight. The little reminders. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that a little bit later on as well. But it's interesting that you said as well, when you were working and when you were meeting your friend, and he was like, well, why don't you just do that as a full-time job? So it wasn't the fact that you were sitting in your corporate job going like, this is it, I've had enough, I can't do this anymore. I need to, follow my passions and my purpose and do something else. It was more like a step-by-step process that it integrated more and more into your life by you doing it and exploring it and finding different avenues of really practicing as well.
Yeah, I think what I always advise people is exactly, it's a step-by-step process. I already took a step. Like back home in Holland, I already worked, within corporate jobs, the most passionate job I could find, changing the world with a small startup, colorful, fun advertising, everything. And when I came to Australia, I already changed from, first I was a contractor doing like a corporate job. I'm like, okay, I have to get out of here. So I did think that, like I have to do something different. And then I made the next step. Like instead of going instantly to...
We've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there, exactly. But what I always find that if you then jump into your passion project and make it a job, the danger is that there's too much pressure on there. Because if instantly I would have had to make money with illustrations, I would have been so scared that I couldn't make anything. So what I always advise people and what I see myself doing, I take small steps. But first I found a 3-day job in something that was not too terrible, but something that I studied and I was really good in. Like I was a good marketing manager, I knew. And I found a contracting job, luckily, with my old job at Unilever, 3 days a week, that could pay the rent. And I know that sounds like a luxury, but it is possible if you really want it. Try to find something in less time, even if it's just, if you can work 4 days and 1 day you can, spend on your passion, but at least you can give it room and space and you have time to, well, literally, I would say freelance, but like free and roam with the things you want to grow. But if there's a little spark and it has to be a big fire because it has to pay your mortgage, it's easy to lose the spark, if it makes sense.
Yeah, and that's interesting as well, because I know there's the saying as well, when you start walking the path, even though if you don't know what your path is, once you start walking it, it starts forming in front of you. And that's exactly what you're saying with, even if you work 4 days somewhere in a job and then you have 1 day to explore what you're really passionate about, what you really want to do, where you can keep learning and developing yourselves. But at least you're doing something on that path so it can start forming itself rather than just dreaming about it.
And thinking about that, I actually started that back home before because at those corporate jobs I did work, in the end, I got really ill. With me, I always fall ill and then I change. I think a lot of people have that. And I thought, I love my job, but why am I working 5 days a week?
It's always the last thing though, isn't it? It's like the body gives you so many little
triggers.
Hints. Yeah, and then you don't listen, and at some point it just goes like, nah, you're not listening, here you go, down.
Yeah, although at this point in my life, because I have had that a couple of times, like getting ill and then changing. Last December, I saw it coming and I changed before I felt any physical or mental pain. And I just quit. Like I just quit. I dropped everything and I stopped working. Even if I had like a stock of my book and I had stocks of my Christmas cards and need to sell it, learn. But I thought, no, wait, I'm just not in a good vibe in a way that, how do I want to live? I want to live a restful, peaceful life, inspired. I want to draw. And I was suddenly in a vibe of, oh no, I need to sell this, and thought, no, this is like a different type of anxiety that I don't want to live. So, no. So
I'm so glad you did that. That's so beautiful to hear, because it is, like you said, you can't just get into that stress state in something that you don't necessarily love doing, or where you feel like that's not even really my passion or my purpose. It can also happen if you are following your passion and your purpose,
Yes.
And you see
and that's something I never knew.
Yeah, and I think, working in Sydney in the Changemaker community as well, and you've been in it for years as well. I think we both have seen a lot of people going through that, through a lot of anxiety and burnouts, and just because there's so much pressure on their shoulders that they feel like
the world is never fixed.
Everything on their own. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So my first step on my path was following your passion, but then even then, you can completely break down and burn out and everything. I thought, if I do what I love, then all is well. And I still believe in that, but there's a different part as well. Like you can also go too fast in doing what you love, I think. Or feeling like there's some intentions underneath it. Like I need to save the world, or just, that's stupid. You don't need to save the world. It's okay if you first make yourself happy. Because if you make yourself happy, the world will be a better place instantly. And you can help other people feel better about themselves as well. And if we do that, it will spread like a positive wildfire. And the world will be a better place. More than you worrying about, oh my God, everything is going wrong. Because I felt very happy in Australia and I felt very blessed that I could live in Bondi Beach. I lived on the beach and I made illustrations for a living. And I still had time to, it was not like I was burning out, like I was working too hard, because I went to the park and I lay down in the afternoon. I did meditation, sometimes yoga, I went swimming, That's why it completely surprised me when I suddenly, couldn't work or sleep anymore. But I'm not sure if we're at that chapter yet.
Yeah, we can actually go into that now, because I found it really interesting. You sent me through, so your book is only available in Dutch at the moment, but you're working on the English version. And you
yes, I'm halfway.
Yeah, exactly. You sent me through the first half of the book. And it's really interesting how you're saying, I was the happiest I've ever been when I was at that point. And still, I ended up breaking down and ending up in a burnout. So talk us a little bit through that and how that happened. And, now looking back, do you see some of the signs that have happened, or is it still something that kind of completely caught you by surprise?
Well, first I want to say that however we call it, it's all fine. So, for example, you call it burnout, and I do often use that because people find more comfortable. But it's also been called depression with even a hint of psychosis and anxiety. Like I was just in a completely shithole. Suddenly, I could only feel anxiety. And with depression, I thought, oh, but that's not me, I'm a happy, positive person that travels the world and, is never afraid to do what I want and I do what I love. So it's not like I'm some kind of... I had an illusion that it was people that have no friends living in the attic that had depressions kind of thing.
I love that you're saying living in the attic, because just for our listeners, you're currently sitting in an attic recording a podcast.
I know. Yeah, I'm quite at home now in my attic, but I used to not go there because I thought that's where the demons live. But now I'm okay. They can sit next to me on the couch. But, that was kind of my perception. So... But it is kind of what happened. And the other thing that I find important before I start telling the story, I'm getting there, is that, yes, with hindsight, I see what happened, but it didn't help me in the beginning. Like, you want to know what happened. Oh my God, how is this happening? But you first have to give yourself time to recover and calm again. And you don't need to know why it happened in order to get well. That's what I found important. Okay, this is what happened. I was doing my thing and working, making illustrations. Yeah, I was even asked to be like a creative lead for certain really crazy cool projects, we did some work for the University of Sydney, etc. And how I remember it starting is just, we were on holiday near Darwin. We were looking at Kakadu National Park, if I remember right. And we were traveling there and suddenly at night I couldn't sleep. But it was not like, oh, I had a bad night's sleep. And it's still emotional for me, just bear with me to talk about this. And maybe everyone that ever experienced insomnia or anything finds like, I don't even want to mention the word sleep, because it gets me like the shivers again. Because it was not like I can't doze off, but I could not sleep at all. And I thought, okay, well, that's a night, You think, okay, that's crazy, but let's see. And then the next night I couldn't sleep, and the third night I couldn't sleep, and not even like a minute of dozing off. There was nothing. My total body was on. And I was meditating and drawing and everything, but at some point at the third night I got heart palpitations, and I was going crazy. I was like, what the fuck is happening? And Lars, my husband, he was like snoring away. Well, not snoring, well, not the reason I couldn't sleep, but he was like dozing off and sleeping. I was like, what the fuck is happening? And we went to a doctor and I got some sleeping medication, etc. And at some point, like, long story short, is that this phase, it almost lasted for 6 weeks, where I went to doctors and I went to more natural doctors as well. And I tried everything because I needed to be fixed and I needed to get better. And how can I sleep and what's wrong with my body? And my thyroid was completely off and my hormones. And, well, you hear what I'm doing here, where I got... I don't know, somehow I got pulled in more and more in that spiral of craziness. And now I know that. I mean, it's not for nothing that in the army I hope they don't do it anymore, but I heard and saw in movies that they used to use sleep deprivation as torture because it literally makes you crazy. And within 6 weeks, I actually was crazy. So in the beginning, after 3 days, and I went back to Sydney and I started, but I couldn't really work anymore because I went to do some work, but I got like kind of panic attacks, which I never had before, but probably because of the thyroid and because of the sleeping, not sleeping. And I thought, okay, it's better just to calm down. But when you're calming down, you're at home doing nothing and your thoughts can even get more grip of you. And in the first couple of weeks, it just felt completely physical. So where my body just wouldn't relax anymore. And at some point I remember that, because people said, are you nervous about something? Are you thinking? I'm like, no! But it was just like, there were 7 lions in front of me, but they weren't there. But that's how my body felt. And at some point after a couple of weeks, I mean, you do get a bit crazy. And suddenly I know that I was in bed and I suddenly kind of felt like it got into my head in a way that I could actually make it worse by even thinking about it. And then I thought, oh fuck, now I'm in a really bad place. Because now I'm, it felt like levels and I was going lower and lower every week. Until at some point I was just it didn't even feel I will belong to this world anymore. Like I was looking outside and it just felt you're literally in a different zone. Like I never did drugs because I know I have enough bad trips and good trips inside of me already. But I can imagine that if I want to explain to people, I always say, well, it felt like I took something and I was just in a completely bad trip for, back then 6 weeks. And in the end, it was like a couple of months. So that's also how I know where people, what you say that more people have this and had this back here in Amsterdam. I met people and also in Australia where you're so passionate and you're working. But if something like this happens to your body and mind, and it doesn't matter where it starts first or what is the reason, even if you work too hard or if anything can happen. I now see, I didn't know, but I now see that I had 2 miscarriages in a row, which I already knew, of course, it probably has something to do with it. They were early miscarriages, but still, so your thyroid and your hormones go all wacky. But also, if there's a lot of life events, I mean, in 2-3 years, I was feeling really good in Australia, but I did, move to a different country, leave everything behind, quit my jobs like 3 times, set up my own illustration business, moved houses twice, which is quite a stressful thing in Sydney. Well, people can probably imagine finding a house. So all those things. And then sometimes, talking about, okay, do we want to move back? And I wanted to stay in Sydney. And sometimes my husband wanted to go back to Amsterdam. So it's all stressful. There's so many life events that somehow your system just gives an error and says, this is too much. I'm just going to shut down the whole system because we can't focus, we can't function anymore. But if your system shuts down, it's a lot of pain. And it was so much pain that I just felt I was not there anymore. And I would never be there anymore. My dad at some point came to get me because Lars was actually away on business for a week to Europe. And I was there in Sydney alone, you might remember. And I was completely gone. Like I was so sleep deprived. I just didn't know how to live anymore. And I asked my dad to come over, and he did. He took like a plane from Amsterdam. And Lars came back as well, but they were shocked with what I found because I was like not even 1% of the Marieke I used to have been and was just 6 weeks earlier. And my dad stayed for 2 weeks, and then they thought, well, we kind of had to decide together. But I mean, how much could I really decide that it was just not viable to stay in Sydney because I wanted to go to like an emergency psychiatrist and everything and I'm like the person that was like most against medication at all, but there was no saving me. Like I literally thought I was already not there anymore. I thought I had to try everything, but there was no quick fix. So there was no way to stay in Sydney because there was no way that I was gonna suddenly, even though you sense that you fell off like some kind of cliff in 6 weeks, it's not like you're gonna get back up the cliff in 6 weeks. And that was the hardest thing. Because I thought I've never been happy in Australia. So if I leave Australia, I already don't know who I am anymore. I'm never going to get well anymore if I leave there. But I had to. So I went on a plane with my dad and Lars had to pack everything up and still Like went a month to Australia and then a month here to the Netherlands, and for 3 months he kept traveling back and forth. So there I was, the successful illustrator living on the beach, happy in my flip-flops, and suddenly I lived back with my parents in rainy Holland. And not only didn't I have a job, I couldn't even get a job because I didn't even know how to drink a cup of tea without being completely anxious. So
so you left Sydney with a really heavy heart?
Yeah.
Just because that was the only option at that point, and then you find yourself at your parents' house.
Yeah.
Trying to get better.
Actually, in the attic, because my childhood room is in the attic too.
We've got an attic theme today.
I know. Yeah.
So how did that feel, being back in?
Yeah, but terrible.
In
but even like, and even talking about this, like now we can have a conversation, but I can, and maybe that's how I can relate with people that are currently in a heavy depression, anxiety, or anything. You can tell me what I feel, but it was like I was in a different realm. You know, it's not like you and me, like currently we're feeling, for example, you know, sad, or I can feel really sad. But I was just barely alive, you know. I was just 24/7 in anxious thoughts. Like if you're talking about mindfulness and being here, I wasn't here. And somehow my brain got stuck in the thought mode and not in the I'm feeling where I'm sitting right now and I'm talking to you mode. You know, sometimes you're drifting off maybe and you're thinking about the laundry you need to do. Well, I was in that laundry space all the time, only it was very scary, awful laundry. So I just felt ridiculously bad, like I couldn't be alone.
What did you do to try and get better at that point?
Well, I think the worst thing about such a case, you feel really alone. You think I'm the only person that ever felt like this. Like, I'm crazy. Like, who am I? Like, I was literally packing my stuff in Sydney. I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like, this is like a Twilight Zone. So you feel really alone, but you're not. Because now I know a lot of people went through that. And the thing, I remember actually back in Sydney even, Lars went back and I was like, okay, God. I actually told Lars, you're never going to get your wife back. Like, I'm never going to be well again. You might have just already moved on because I'm gone. And that made him so sad. I thought, oh, okay. I mean, you even think that people won't miss you. You know, like it's really strange. And I started Googling it. I just Googled like, can you get well of depression? I mean, now it's almost kind of silly, but when you have a physical illness, people are like, and even if it's something really, really bad, like cancer, often it's like there's a doctor and they say, okay, this is what we're going to do. 75% of people get well, or 95 or whatever. But if you have something mental, or it's really fake. Like, I didn't meet a lot of people that are going to say, okay, this is what's going to happen, you're going to get well. No, it's more like, yeah, it can be a bit of this, a bit of that. And they look at you like with wary eyes and be like, oh my God, you know, you're very bad off. And it's not helping because there's no hope. But I found an article and it said some kind of homeless man in San Francisco. He had a very, very bad depression. Like it was literally couldn't focus and couldn't live. And somehow, I think with medication or whatever, he got back up on his feet. The story is not as relevant, but what it brought me was 1% hope. And I told myself, if there's 1% chance that I can get well in the next 10 years, I have to do everything I can to do that. I can't give up for 10 years. So I have to, if there's 1% hope in 10 years that I get well, I have to put my focus on that, no matter how painful it is. And I have to do that. I couldn't even do it for myself, but I did it for Lars, my husband, and for my dad. And the rest of my family, but they weren't there at the moment. So, because I thought, I mean, I had the best life ever. I still saw that. Like, I mean, my God, I have, you know, loving friends, family, but it just didn't feel like I was part of it anymore. Like, I didn't want any other life but mine, but somehow I lost it, and I don't know why. It was some kind of lost in my head.
That's amazing that you gave yourself 10 years, though, that you said even if there's 1% chance in the next 10 years. Because that's a really long period of time.
I know,
if you
and
say
it's
like,
even longer.
If 1% in like the next 6 months or the next year, you know, but like 10 years, it's like, okay, I'm really going to stick in there. I'm going to fight
I mean,
for
it was
this.
even in my head. I mean, I would be in an asylum, you know, for 10 years because I couldn't function anymore. So locked away. But at least by 10 years, people would understand, okay, you know, she's really in a lot of pain. It's really not going to get better. So,
Well, it also shows in what a difficult and challenging space you were, that you thought it was going to potentially take you up to 10 years to get out of
yeah,
that
and even then, there would be a 1% chance, not more. Like it felt, and that felt slim.
Yeah.
So that's how bad I felt, It's not like, 50% is 6. No, it was like, if there's 1% in 10 years, and I even didn't believe it yet. Like, I didn't feel a lot in my belly, but I felt like, oh my God, it's just too much. I can't do it. 1% in 10 years. And I had to claim to Lars and I'm going to do everything possible, even though it's continuously painful. And that's what I did. And within 6 months, I felt like, okay, this might somehow get better, like within 3 to 6 months. And I went to all these phases, and at some point I think, okay, I feel kind of okay again. And after a year, I felt better, and after 1.5 years, I felt better than before. And that's when I thought, oh my God, if I ever get into this again, I need to make myself like some kind of handbook. Because people ask me like, oh my God, I have a friend, and she's completely burnt out and depressed, and what did you do? What's the one thing you did? I'm like, no, I didn't do one thing. Mm-hmm. I did 1,000 things, all in different phases. Like, I love meditation, but you couldn't have asked me in the beginning days to meditate. I couldn't even drink a cup of tea without going crazy. So there's different things for different phases, and mainly there's a lot of love and hope that I'm now giving myself in the book. Like, if I ever go to it again, I want to be able to, like in a train, you have like the emergency brakes. Well, something like that. Emergency brakes. Open the cupboard and there's your book. Like, that's literally the beginning of the book. I know you think you're never going to be okay again, but you will. I remember the steps. This is what we're going to do. Turn a page. And that's when it starts, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're going to talk about the book in a while, but when you were just saying before, when somebody has a physical illness, or let's say you have a broken leg, you go into the hospital and you're going to put a cast on there and it's going to heal and it's going to be good again. While when you have a mental illness, or if you have something wrong with you in terms of, depression, burnout, whatever it may be, I think the thing is there is no one size fits all, because everybody has a different history, everybody has a different story, everybody had different experiences. So everybody needs to be really looked at as an individual, and that's how then professionals can help you or support you through it. And that's what you just said within your book as well. It's nice because there is not one thing that you can do. There is a million things that you could potentially do, and you kind of need to draw on the things that work for you during different phases of what you're going through.
Yes, that's true. So it's true that, you will pick out, I also say, well, I'm talking about the book, but more about my experience. If I help people, I say, well, this is what helped me. And everyone's going to find their own journey. But it's nice if there's some toolbox around, like these are the tools I used. Pick the ones that address you, and you're going to find a million others. But I do find that, even with a leg, if it's broken, it's not always broken the same way. It's also individual, but at least we have like the toolbox. This is the toolbox. We're going to fix you. And I do find that, and that's what I'm bringing now, I think, to the world of mental health. It is okay to have more compassion, more hope, more, you're not crazy. You're completely normal for feeling what you do. Especially now with COVID or Corona, you still feel crazy when you start feeling, depressed or lonely or no. It's a completely normal physical reaction to what's happening. And with me too, I wasn't going crazy. I just went through a lot. And my system told me this is too much. Yeah, I now see that it was still, maybe an unhealthy reaction, if it makes sense, I felt ill and I needed to be repaired, but I wasn't crazy. And you feel crazy. And at some point I found a really good psychologist, and he was the first person that saw me as a human and not as a mental illness patient. And I think that's very important. Like to see, you're human, I'm human, you're going through a tough time now, but people do get well. Because when you break your leg while you are in the hospital, you're often not scared of, oh my God, what if I break my leg again? But with me, it was, and maybe some people recognize it, with depression, it was felt like, oh my God, now I'm a depressed person. And I'm going to be, depressed every couple of years. Because that's what you hear more often, like, oh my God, they were depressed and they had like 6 episodes in their life. And in the end, they kind of stopped because I thought, that's at least what it was in my head. I'm not sure if you can relate, but that was my fear of I used to be, happy and passionate and enjoying life, and now I have to learn with being depressed the rest of my life. But it maybe sometimes it is, but for me it wasn't in my personality. It was just a reaction of my body to a certain period, and although I'm sensitive, I can still live my life now being happy, enthusiastic and inspired person as I used to be. I just know better what to look for and how to take care of myself.
Yeah, and it's also interesting when it happened with you, right? Because like we discussed before already, first of all, you were really happy, but what really stands out for me as well is that it started when you actually went on a holiday with Lars. And it is this thing, where we are all living such a busy life and everybody has a million things on. And a lot of the time you hear from people, as soon as I'm on a holiday, I get sick. And they might get a flu or a cold or whatever. And in your case, It was just the mental overstimulation of things, But it's almost like your body was waiting for you to take a break, to show you that you need to slow down. And I think that's what happens a lot.
Yeah, and even on holiday, I was actually craving a holiday of doing nothing and laying on the beach. But no, we went like driving 3,000 kilometers, through Kakadu and sleeping like in a shack. It was not, I didn't feel like I was in a safe place, and I think that didn't help. It was still like, even on holiday, it was kind of like survival mode, and that just ticked it off, where it's just too much survival mode, where, I actually needed a warm bath.
It's almost you mimic what was going on in your life, subconsciously in your life. You mimic that by heading into Kakadu, where you had to be like running away from crocodiles.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it? You didn't choose, why didn't you choose the beach holiday, You were like, nah, we keep going on that.
No, because we're in Australia now and you need to, we need to see everything and tick off all those things. And yeah, I know. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I loved everything so much, I was, always in, how do you call it, like 5th gear or something, like I was going on and until my car broke down. Because it just needed a fix. It just needed to rest. It just needed to do nothing, I think.
So you said it took you about 1.5 years of being back in Amsterdam to really continually get better and then get to a point where you were like, oh my God, I'm actually really well again and I'm even better than I was before. What were some of the things during that time that you did in order to get to that point?
Well, it's hard because, it's a whole book. It's 1,000 things. But I think the first thing that's...
You're going to talk about the book next.
No. But I'm always thinking, like, what did I do? And because I'm living the book now, that's always what I think. The first thing that is the hardest, but most essential is accepting. It was accepting that I was in this situation. Because for the first weeks, months, I was like, this is not supposed to be happening. This is not my life. This is not supposed to be happening. I need to be in Australia and, do my thing and be creative and know all these amazing people. And this was not my path, But by keeping that thought alive, I was not getting anywhere because I was just going circles in my mind. Until at some point when I literally did not know how to do anymore, Lars, my husband, he said, call Faustia. She's my old meditation teacher that I used to have a really good connection with when I lived in Rotterdam, a different city in Holland. And I just called her. I just thought, I have no idea where I'm at. I have no idea who I am, but I need some help or something. And she was like my guardian angel. She is the most amazing human alive because she said, okay, call me again the day after tomorrow. And we started calling twice a week. And she's also a teacher / professor in like philosophy, but the philosophy of life. So she's very much Zen meditation artist and everything. And she took me through it. So when I would start talking, this is not what's supposed to be happening, and this is not me. And she said, how do you know that? How do you know that this is not supposed to be? I mean, it's happening, right? So apparently it's supposed to be happening. And because we could talk on that level, it took me out of like the anxious day-to-day level, and it really helped me to accept where I'm at right now. And also like a contract I made with myself, like if there's 1% chance in 10 years, I just focusing on what do I want? Not how I feel now, not I can't see a future, no. What do I want? I want to go skiing again. I want to be happy again. I want to dance on the beach again. I want to be, be able to sit in the garden and drink a cup of coffee or tea. Well, I don't drink coffee. A cup of tea without having all these awful thoughts. Okay, so that's the goal. That's what I want. And I made myself a contract. I am going to be there again, and I'm going to do everything to get there. And after the accepting and kind of saying, okay, this is my challenge now. This is my day job now. It's not about making illustrations and, being flown everywhere to go to those days were amazing. But now this was my life. And my day job is getting better. And in order to do that, I actually got a day job too, in a way. So she made me make a day schedule every day, and I send it to her on my phone. It doesn't matter so much what you do. It matters that there's a schedule. Because there's no schedule, your thoughts will become devilish and take over. Because you're giving them all the playing field. So I started making days. Even if it's like, okay, at 8 I get up, at 9 I make breakfast, at 10 I go for a walk, at 12 I rest for an hour. Rest. It didn't feel like rest, but at least, it said rest in my schedule. So I made a day schedule every day. I did that for like even 3 years. And still, even if I fall back now, I do it again. Or if I just feel a day off, I'm like, okay, I have to make a schedule again. And I made a week schedule. And everything in me, like every fiber, kind of wanted to give up. It didn't want to make that week schedule. It just wanted to say, this is never going to be better again. I'm never going to be okay again. Why are you doing this? But I still did it. And that's the thing where all the things felt, that's so weird. Like I always was a feeling person, like following your passion and stuff. But everything I needed to do to get well, actually things that are good for any person, because they're like general health rules, it felt counterintuitive. Because somehow when you go through kind of like a barrier where your battery is so low, it's like my psychiatrist explained to me, it's like having a pneumonia or, it's like the bacteria, they wanted to get you, somehow you go into a downward spiral and it just wanted to keep you down. So everything is counterintuitive. The trick was to do it anyway. And to do that in such a meticulous, like everyday way that somehow it felt like a habit again, and you felt like breaths of fresh air in between. So sometimes I learned how to knit. I don't particularly like knitting, but that was the first thing where I experienced, oh my God, I haven't thought in 10 minutes. Like I was just sitting here and knitting, 10 minutes. Okay. And it felt like such a relief to get 10 minutes that I thought, okay, but if I can do 10 minutes, then I can do an hour at some point. And at some point, it's going to be a day. And at some point, it's going to be 10 days. And at some point, it's going to be a life. So it's, when I'm talking to you now, I see like it's all the rules, like focusing on the good and the bad. But yeah, it's hard work. But that's how it went.
And it's always harder when you're in that state as well, isn't it? Because when we are well and when we're sitting here talking about it, it's like, yeah, it sounds easy.
It sounds easy.
But then you are, and we've all been there, to a degree, to one degree or another. But yeah, when you are having that bad day or that bad time, like you said, even getting up in the morning feels hard, making a cup of tea feels hard. Thinking about hanging up the washing feels overwhelming. Yeah. So there are those small things that then kind of get you through.
Yeah, and I had family and friends, so I made kind of like an A-team of the family and friends. So I had my psychologist and a good psychiatrist I found via other people. And he was the first person, like I mentioned, that actually said, okay, he could explain to me what happened. That my battery, like my mental battery, just was completely in the red, like completely gone. And when you do, your body just goes into an alarm mode. And that's what all the symptoms were. But there are rules to get your battery to slowly charge again. It's not like a phone you can put in a charge and the next day it's full, but there's all these things you can do, and that's, sleep. And in the beginning, if you need aids to sleep, then, fine. Well, I'm not a doctor, but for me, that was needed. So sleep is important, but also, having the day schedule. So I went back to Tony Chocolonely, like the chocolate company, and I said, I've got no idea where I'm at, but can I please, because I did all this volunteer work, I need to have something to do, somewhere to go, because you go crazy. Healthy people go crazy. And if you're already in a bad space,
totally.
You need to have some kind of repetition. And even if you start working in a garden, or it doesn't matter, but just like I worked, I think 3 hours a day, like 10 hours a week or something, 3 days a week. But it gave me a schedule at least, so I don't have to figure out what to do all the time. So I went then, I started by picking up the phone. And actually I found out that when at work, I could kind of be in a good place. So within 3 or 4 months, I was doing like marketing work again. And so all through the year, that really helped me. There's so many people that you're not alone. And there's so many people, you still feel alone, but there's so many people that are willing to help you with these kind of things. And then my family, like friends, stayed over because I was scared to sleep at night. Me, I used to travel to Australia, Argentina, everywhere alone. And I was afraid I couldn't sleep at home at night alone. But my parents stayed over, and then my friends and Lars. And on Saturday I would make a bushwalk. Sunday I went to the beach and to a cafe and did board games. And it sounds all fun. I wasn't enjoying it at the moment, but at least I was, training my body that everything is safe. And I'm just following, this path. And more over the months, I could feel distracted and just, enjoy the board game for 2 hours. Hey, that's 2 hours. That's progress. And that was progress too. Like when I would focus on who I used to be kind of thing, or who I wanted to be, I would get completely overwhelmed because it was like, oh my God, I'm a shadow. The trick for me was, and I would never imagine that, the trick for me was looking down. Like, okay, I already felt 5% less shitty than last month. Awesome, keep looking down. So, I had to climb the ladder backwards kind of thing, with my back to the top, because I was just thinking, okay, next time it's going to be 10% less shitty. Okay, then I'm going to be, and slowly that number went up. Until at some point you come at a tipping point, and then you're like, okay, I feel relieved. Then you're still scared that it might come back, but then you keep on walking the path.
It's interesting when you're talking about that, because the two things that came up for me there as well was, sometimes when we have so much to do and life is so busy, all we want to do is nothing. But then when we don't have anything to do, that's not good for us as humans either. We do need something to do, and we do need a purpose to get up in the morning, and connection to other people, and all that to really thrive as humans as well. So yeah, like you said, even small amounts of time with different people and doing certain tasks was getting you through that time. And yeah, that's really important, I think. And the other thing I loved as well is when you said you're looking down and not up to who you used to be, but kind of down to what happened yesterday. And there is the saying, it's usually you say it with other people, it's like, don't compare yourself with somebody else. Compare yourself with the version that you were yesterday, and see if you can make it better the next day. And I think that's a really good metaphor as well to look at when you're not doing well. It's like, just those small steps of how can I incrementally try and get better, and what can I find and implement in my days that I know will support me. Even like you said, a lot of the time they're probably not fun while you're doing them. You probably don't feel like going for a walk or going for a run or whatever it may be, but then you will feel better when you have done it.
Yeah, exactly. And the strange thing is that when your battery is so in the red, so to say, like so empty, a lot of people, I still don't have that by the way, but a lot of people, if you go for a run, you don't feel like it, you go for a run and afterwards you will feel better. When you're in that red state of like depression or anxiety, you won't feel better. But if you do it for 3 months and you just continue doing it, you will slowly get better, but it's not instant.
Exactly.
And that's hard. That's what makes it hard, because you need to trust when you don't have trust. And that's why hope and trust and saying, yes, this is a normal thing. You do get through it. This is what we're going to do. I believe in you is so important.
Mm-hmm. And so when you did get better again after 1.5 years, talk me through that a little bit. And was that the time when you were like, I really need to write this all down and I really want to help other people? How did the book come to be? How did that process start?
I do think that, everyone else would probably say, like, I think I was better after a year, but after 1.5 years, I felt more confident. It just takes time to get a layer of protection around yourself again. And I don't even know when I think it was a year after or something. At some point, I just got kind of like an epiphany of one. It was like a February night, evening, dark, and I was sitting on the couch, and suddenly I thought, I'm going to write a book. And for 2 hours, I only wrote down notes and everything. And I was just like, okay, and it's going to be called My Big Breakdown Do-Book, or free translated, My Big Depression Do-Book. And now, I mean, Soul Sunshine, it feels more like, I didn't think about writing a book, but it was just something I needed to do, kind of thing. It feels more like I kind of downloaded it than that I made it up. And even more when I get through the creative process. So it started by an idea in February. And then I thought, okay, this is what I have to do. And my assignment, I had a good job again at Tony Chocolonely, but it was an interim, like contract assignment. It ended in April, and I thought, okay, I'm not gonna leave like for another job or go anywhere else. And then I got manifested an email that said that a niece, but I have a very large family, so it's a further away niece kind of thing. She had a campsite home in Portugal, very basic, and they had a room for an artist retreat. So if you had a project, you could go there very cheap. And I got that email and I thought, this is it. I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there for 6 weeks and write the book. And a lot of people with anxiety can relate that you need to reinvent yourself completely. So although I used to, travel Australia and travel the world, for me it was quite, it's a step again to, be alone, go for 6 weeks to the middle of nowhere. Like I literally had to do a 1.5 hour hike to get a coffee somewhere. And then still it was like a very tiny town. But I was near a river and I really, I really liked it. I didn't want to bring my phone and anything. I didn't want social media, nothing. But then I was kind of like, people said, okay, you need to bring something. Okay, I brought my phone, but I didn't turn it on like for 7 or 10 days or something. And it was an interesting process because in the beginning you think, okay, I'm going to help other people. I'm going to write this book. And I started writing. Like, I didn't know how to write a book. And I started like, this is what you need to do. Kind of that tone of like, okay, this, when you have this, I feel so sorry. This is what, and I thought, oh, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. No, honey. You need to make this book for you. I could only make this book for me. Because I don't know, but like you said, it's a personal journey. I didn't know what anyone was going through. But I would know what I would need if I ever find myself again. And that has been such a healing journey in that sense, because the book is so sweet. Like literally when I read it, and sometimes people say that as well, like if I read it, I'm like, wow, it's so much love in there. It's like completely countering all the depressive thoughts. It's the sweetest side of me that I don't even know yet. I mean, I literally have to read the book myself and think, wow, that's inside me too, Like my best friend that would actually sit next to me and say, we're going to pull through this. We're going to do this. And it's going to be okay. And I'm never going to leave you. And we're going to continue on this journey together. So I went to Portugal for 6 weeks, and by the end of it, I just found out different phases, and I did know I couldn't read anymore. I'm not sure if you've ever been in that phase, but when you're very busy in your head, I couldn't read. So I couldn't make a written book because I wouldn't be able to read it if you were actually in burnout or depression, because you're so focused on all the negative thoughts. And all the books that are there on depression are kind of depressive. Like if you would read them now, you would not be happy. So I thought, that's not what I need, I need something that is bubbly and shows life and actually brings me joy and illustrations, even if I can't feel it at that point. And as I was and am an illustrator, I wrote the book by hand completely, and it's a hand illustrated book. So there's not a typed word in it. Everything is drawn and written, and it's because I could read comic books. That's the only thing I could process. So if I wanted to give myself a guideline, like how will you get out of this, it needed to be an illustrated one. And so it's an illustrated handbook on how to the bleep get out of this. We would, in Holland, I'm not sure if you had it in Austria or in Australia, when you would be a kid and in the summer, there would be like a thicker version of the comic books, like a do-book, like a Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse do-book kind of thing with all these games in it. Well, I see it like that. It would be like my holiday do-book, but then for the worst trip of my life. But at least I would have all these steps and things to fill in and coloring images, and to never feel like, oh my God, what am I going to do in between psychologist appointments? Well, this is what you're going to do. Yeah, so it took a couple of months still after, and I made a promise to myself. I made 3 pages every day. So I had like speaking points. I already knew, like, I wrote down on big paper. I wrote down everything that helped me. Like, what did I do? And I found out there's actually 5 phases in it. And some things I did in the end, I couldn't do in the beginning. There's 5 phases. I gave them the color of the rainbow and color of the battery, like from red. How am I going to move from red to blue, greenish, happy again? And there's all these different things in different phases. This is interesting now, because now my mind, I heard yours, and suddenly I was thinking, sorry, you can actually cut this out or not, because it's quite interesting. Suddenly now I was really in my story, and suddenly I was thinking, oh, this might take too long. Are people still listening to my story? So I do have that critical voice still.
Here's the pro.
Here is it. Here it is. And then I lose the point. You know, you're suddenly out of it. You're like, oh, but actually I was making a point here. Oh yeah, I remember it again.
No, I
so
like it because I was just pulling it up on my screen here, the faces, because I actually do want you to tell us what the faces were.
Yeah, well, you have them on your screen. I have them by mind, of course. It's a Dutch book, so I don't have the English translations yet. And I mean, of course, the first phase is accepting. The first phase is accepting, and it's accepting the shit, actually, because I did want a lot of humor in it. Because I mean, you can be depressed, but you can still, I mean, you can't really laugh, but you can still appreciate.
You can
humor.
try.
So
you can try.
You can try at least, you know. It does help to not make it too serious.
Honestly, but it is like that though, isn't it? If you are really down and if you're not feeling great, if you have a chat with a good friend and somebody really makes you laugh, even if it's just for like 10 seconds, you're like, oh my God, that just felt so good. Now I can cry again. I
know. And it gets things in motion.
For like however long.
Yeah. So I have them here. So phase 1 is let's accept the shit. Phase 2, it's our emergency plan. So in which I completely draw out, like, if your battery is completely low, these are the basic rules, you know, like rest, sleep, be in nature, find distraction, set up your A-team. So it's kind of like, okay, we're going to make an emergency plan together, and this is what we're going to do, and we keep on doing it for a couple of months. And then you roll into phase 3, where I did find, like, okay, well, the sun actually is coming out again, and I can feel it again. And there's new challenges, because if you feel good again, you're like, but what if you feel bad again? And you pull yourself down. And there's tricks to get over that phase as well. And then phase 4 and 5 is more like, how do you build on and how do you really blossom and keep going? And also at some point think, okay, I'm done with it now. I'm out of it. Just start living again, you know? It's all well. And I found a really great yoga studio here that also had a little cafe. And in the morning they did free meditations. So for, I think, 2 months, every morning I went into the meditation for like 45 minutes or something. And then took a coffee. And then I did the Artist Way course where you free write 3 pages every day. And then my only goal for the day would be to draw 3 pages. And that was my rhythm. And it was so lovely. Like the making of the book was like the most amazing period. And still, I'm finding my way back to that. Now also with creating the English version, but also with different book ideas I have. And at some point, one week, it was just like, oh, I think this is the last page. So it felt more like a delivery, like something, when people said, wow, it's so amazing that you wrote this book. I'm like, no. The thing I can take credits for is the discipline and the going to meditate and to create 3 pages every day. If I didn't make it in the morning, I didn't go to bed, like I made it at 10 in the evening. I didn't go to bed until I made the 3 pages, because then I knew, okay, if I do that for a certain amount of time, I'm going to get to a book. And I don't even draw with pencil. I draw with like ink pen. And there's almost no page that I actually thought, it just kind of came pouring out of me.
It flowed.
And I did find some like, oh my God, I don't like this illustration. But then I told myself, okay, I made it easy for myself because I was making myself a book. So I thought, oh my God, this is not my normal style. I don't like this illustration. And then I thought, well, hello, Mrs. Perfectionist. If you're now going to give yourself rules how to draw your own book, we're going crazy. So we're not going to do that. And all these different styles came out actually. And still I found a book and I'm like, okay, that's not my fun page. And then now I get people that read it and are a fan. And they say, oh, this is my favorite page. I hang it on my toilet to remind myself of this every day. And I'm like, okay, If I would have made a book for other people, I would have not published that page, no? Mm-hmm. So that helped me get through it. And by the end, when I went on that day, when I thought this is the final page, I felt completely happy. Like I felt like it was a success already.
I also love that you took that pressure away from yourself and said, you know what, I don't know anybody else's journey, but I know my journey, and I'm just going to make this book for myself. And in doing that, you've spoken to such a big audience that can now also benefit from the things that you've learned through your journey, you know?
Yeah. And because I made it for me, I am almost, well, luckily I'm not the only voice, but I'm one of the voices that can say to people, yes, you will get better. Because that's what I needed to hear. I called my father like 3 times a day because all the voices in my head said, you're never going to get well, you're never going to get well. And 3 times a day I called my dad and said, Dad, please tell me I'm going to get well. Yes, you're going to get better. You're going to get better. I know. Okay, thank you. And then I believed it again for 1 minute, and then the voices took over again. But it helped me. So my book is full of that. I'm not going to say, yeah, you probably get well, but it could also be that you are one of the 10% of people that actually will stay depressed for the rest of their lives. Because if you're depressed, what you're going to believe? Of course you're going to believe you're the 10%, because that's still illness. But what I needed to hear was, I don't care. I'm going to get well. And you can decide those things. At some point I also decided, I asked the Fausia, the meditation, my teacher, said, I read an article where actually someone lost their child, which is like one of the worst things I think that can happen to you. And they were interviewed, and in an article they said, I decided that I was going to get out of this stronger. And I thought it was so powerful that I asked my meditation teacher, can I decide that? Yes, you can. So I thought, okay, that's going to be my mantra. I'm going to get out of this stronger. So every time the voices took, in your head, you feel like, okay, this is never going to work. I would repeat to myself, I'm going to get out of this stronger. And I had several of those mantras, but every month I felt like a new one. But it gave me back control that I can actually decide that. I can decide that. Yes, I have decided. So it doesn't matter how I feel now. Feelings never stay. Sunshine never stays, rain never stays. Everything moves. I'm going to get out of this stronger. That's my decision. That's the end of it. Yeah, so because those are the things that I told myself, of course, that's also what I wrote down in the book. And now, by that sense, I can be strong in that voice, because still the only thing I tell people is, this is what I made for me. This is what I have to offer. This is what helped me. I don't know what you're at, but if it anyway, it gives you a sparkle of hope, please use it. Use everything I did, This is on the table. And that's the thing, like in the end, when the book was there, I printed one of them, but it was staring at me. I thought, no, this is not my book. It needs to go into the world. And it's like, well, now that I have a kid as well, it's like with having children, they're not your children. Like the book is not my book. I have had the pleasure to be able to make it and cherishing it. And now I have a job to nourish it and bring it into the world. But it's not my book.
That's beautiful. I love that you've birthed it and now you are sharing it with the world.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful that it's part of my family. Or I am part of its family. Yeah. Now I'm birthing an English twin.
I love it. I cannot wait to read the English twin, because I'm trying to read your Dutch one, and even though they say Dutch and German is very similar, I just cannot figure it out. So I do prefer the English version.
Yeah, I know. And it's really a process, because I was in the beginning, like when I used to say, I'm creating this startup and now everyone's asking me to illustrate, like the annoyance, like suddenly, again with the English version, people say, oh, you need to make an English version. But it's normally when you have a written book, like a typed book, you just send it off to a translator, it gets back, you have an English version, ta-da. But my book is completely hand illustrated. So every letter, every word is written. And often the illustration goes into the text and it's one like mix-up. So making a version in another language means re-illustrating, rewriting the whole book. Every page, every chapter.
It's pretty much like writing another book, yeah.
Yeah. And I found it daunting in the beginning. I thought, oh my God, back to something old. But now I actually love it. So I gave myself permission and the time for this to be my most important project. And I'm actually, because I thought I'm not a copy machine. You thought, oh, you can do, trickies, you can copy the illustrations and then delete a bit and then write over it. But it felt like it's going to be a not so good shadow or copy. So I didn't do that. What I'm now doing, I'm actually remaking it and getting to the same vibe and only having to make 3 pages a day. So I'm making my cherished space again. And next to the Dutch books that I'm selling, so I have a business going on now. But I'm giving myself as much free days as possible, so 3 or 4 days a week in the mornings. The only thing I do is create 3 pages and then I can do whatever I want to nourish myself. So take a walk or go to the sauna, or I don't always manage, but that's what I want to do. Like, you know, I can only give this high level loving output if I really love myself during those days. So I love it. I'm creating it again. And what comes out is actually a different book. So the pages are the same and the text is the same, but I am translating it myself. Well, you can hear my English is okay, but I'm not a native. I mean, I used to write scripts, of course, when I worked at Digital Storytellers too. And if you're living in the country for a couple of years, you get more fluent. Now I'm back in Amsterdam. It's gotten a little bit rusty. But even when I write in my own journal, I often write in English. I don't know why. I love English and I love writing it, but I felt very insecure of not being able to do it. So I looked for a long time to find a translator that can actually feel the soul of the book and has been through anxiety or depression his or herself, because I thought otherwise it's not like a leaflet for an insurance company, you need to translate. It's how can I keep this child alive, but only in a different version. And I found her and I said, okay, I already started because I couldn't wait for the translator because it took me a long time to find a great one. And she's so lovely. And I said, I'm just going to send you the first, 80 pages I already translated myself. And I drew and I thought, okay, otherwise, I can rewrite it. And she called me back 2 weeks later, like almost crying. She said, oh my God, if this book would have been here 20 years ago, my life would have been different, because she had a depression too 20 years ago. And she was like, no, you have to translate it yourself. I'm just going to, rewrite, take the spelling mistakes out of it and rewrite it, because it just needs to come out of me again.
Your heart and soul is in it. It's your
exactly.
Story.
And she said, you can be so sweet. Like, it is a lot of like honey and darling and we will get through this, etc. And she said, as a translator, I wouldn't go that far, but you are going that far, because I'm writing this book for me, but done in English. And now I'm often thinking about you or Bryony, or I'm thinking like, what if I would write this book for one of my best, dearest English friends? And I want to really help them. And that's the vibe I go into when I start writing. And it helped me a lot. And I love it. And I have completely no obligation to draw the same thing. So it's in different colors. I actually think it's prettier. The book is out for a couple of years now. So I really like it. I'm having fun.
I can't wait to hold it in my hands. When will we get it? Like, what's the timeline? No pressure, obviously. But what's the plan?
Well, otherwise the project is too daunting. So I create steps. And my first step is to have the draft book. So to have translated and illustrated every page. And that's by the half of March. So by March I will have the book hopefully ready. Then in April I will send it to you and some other English friends and translate it to, take all the spelling mistakes out and see if the soul is still alive in there. And I hope to have a first English copies actually in hand, like by September, October.
Amazing.
And I always like Blue Monday. It's like the third Monday of January, at least here in this hemisphere. It's supposed to be the most depressive day of the year because it's January and it's cold and it's etc.
The third Monday of the year. I've never heard of that. Blue Monday.
Yeah, third Monday of January.
It's around my birthday. Great.
Oh, really? It's often like the 20th or the 23rd. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's around my brother's birthday too. But so often I use like a date like that to get it more promoted and out there. That is a different way of looking at depression. But step by step, because otherwise it gets too daunting. Because how am I going to get the book to Australia? How am I going to get the book to America?
You have to deliver it yourself.
I self-published. Yeah, exactly. And for me, that's really beautiful, because sometimes people are like, why are you making the book in English? And it's, again, the same. Like, I don't know. I just get my marching orders. I love that. I got that from The Artist Way. And I love how she said that, Julia Cameron said, just wait for your marching orders. Like, there's certain things I need to do in this life. And I know this book wants to be written in English. So here I am making it. And I don't know the steps after that, but it will get to Australia and all the other countries. I self-published this book because I wanted to keep it very pure. So probably going to do that as well there. So if anyone listening and wants to distribute it in Australia, let me know. What I really love is that it's full circle, because I felt so much shame. I have been back to Australia once after it all happened, but I felt so much shame of going through this and not being myself, and I left my whole life behind there. And how beautiful would it be if it's all been for something good and then can help people as well. What feels for me like my second home country.
I think it's
that will
already
be
has
amazing.
been though, hasn't it? Like you've created such a beautiful life now in the Netherlands again, and you've got your husband still, even though you told him to walk away. You've got
I know
your
he stayed.
You've got your beautiful little boy Finn. So like you've done
and
amazingly wonderful.
I didn't even tell you, but even though I self-published, like somewhere this week or this month, the 10,000th copy will be sold. Like, I can't even imagine how many people are 10,000 people. But
that's amazing.
And every week I get messages like people say, "Oh my God, this book saved my life," or "You were my best friend," and it's like not heartbreaking, but it's heart glowing kind of thing. yeah, and that's really special. And it was keeping me going too. Yeah, it's
amazing.
Special.
Imagine all the beautiful souls out there that are struggling, where you're helping them go through that and get through that tough time, and support them. It's huge impact that you're creating there in that space.
Yeah, but then again, I notice a theme in our talk as well, which is good that I kind of notice what I'm actually saying. That again, I made that small. So I thought, if this book, it needs to be published, because if it can help only one other person to get his life back, that would be awesome. And only by that, I could do it, And now it's already 10,000 people. And I'm not stopping before 100,000, so.
Amazing. That's how I started the podcast. I was always like, even if just my mom listens to it, And then I was like,
exactly.
Well, my mom actually can't listen to it because she doesn't speak English. So even if one person... No, but it is...
Even if this George listens to it.
Yeah. Even if one person can get something, can, take something away from it that helps them on their journey, I think it's been worth it, That's always been my motto as well. So I think it's beautiful what you're doing. And so 100,000 is the new 10,000, is it?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so the dream is to be at Oprah with the book. So that's the...
Oprah,
that's
if you're listening...
Yeah, exactly. Which you are, of course.
Which you are, of course. Like, why would you not? Here she
it's
is,
your mom
Marieke,
and Oprah.
For your invitation. Exactly. I love it. Oh, Marieke, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know there is so much more, but we're already at
I'm looking. It's been 1.5 hours. Like, I hope people are you still listening? You can break it up in two, if you want.
Yeah, exactly. People can go for 2 walks over 2 days. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure to hear your story again and see the success that you're having out of that hard time that you've been through, and see how you've just worked so well on yourself to create the life that you really love and that you really want to live, and while you're helping all those other people out there that are going through a similar thing. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for doing the awesome work that you're doing.
Well, thank you, Sylvia. Thank you so much. I really like talking because, I don't know, even though I've been away for years, it doesn't feel like that. I think we're still family. And even though we're not always in the same country, we still are. So, you will see me back in Australia. Oh, and I do want to add one thing, that if anyone, like you are crying now, but I think it's happy tears. But if anyone hears it and, has experience with anxiety or depression or feels really, really bad, I just want to tell you one more time, you will get better and there is hope. And never give up. And go talk to someone or tell a friend and you'll get better. I believe in you. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sylvia.
So the 3 main points of wisdom that came out in our conversation today for me, the first one is really that, acceptance is the most important thing at the beginning, just accepting what's happening and then surrendering of what's happening, just not trying to push it away, but accepting it and listening to it, feeling into it, and, working through it rather than trying to push it away. The second thing is to create a structure and really make a schedule even if it's the simplest 3 things that you put on your daily schedule, like make a cup of tea, sit down and have some nice food and go for a walk with a friend, whatever it may be, just small steps will get you there. Create a schedule, and like Marieke said, it might be hard on the first day, it might be hard in the first month, but it will get better at some point, even if you're not enjoying it at the beginning. And then the third thing is what Marieke just said at the very end as well, is believe in yourself. You will get better. You're not the only one that's going through something like that. There is millions of people out there that are having the same experience, and we do believe in you, and we do believe that you can get through it and you can live the life that you really want to live. So Marieke, you've mentioned a few resources today. You've mentioned the artist's way that you've worked through, obviously your book, which we will put in the show notes, so that people can find that. Anybody who's listening today, you can get in touch with Marieke via Marieke, your website, which is mariekelovestodraw.com, or you've also got one for the book, which is Depri Doe-Boek.nl for the Netherlands. I will put that in the podcast notes as well, so that people
I might have to
addresses.
Have to speed up my English website, but mariekelovestodraw.com is in English, so you can read that.
And then also people can find you on Instagram under @marieke.loves.do.draw. So same kind of thing. But
exactly.
Again, I'll put that in there. So follow Marieke, give her a like, give her a message if you love the work that you do.
Yeah. Or if you want to be the first one, I'll open a mailing list. If you want to be the first one receiving or pre-reading, then let me know.
Exactly. And make sure that we know when the English version is coming out, so we'll have to stay in touch. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. I really hope you guys got something out of our episode today. Marieke has shared her journey with us really vulnerably and has talked about what helped her get through one of the toughest times of her life, how she came out the other side, and how she's written a book out of that, which holds a lot more knowledge and wisdom of what she's been doing to get her through that time. So if you're struggling, go check it out, go on her website, go on her Instagram and see the little tips and pearls of wisdom that she's constantly sharing with people that are going through a rough time. I really hope this conversation does inspire you to check out her work and see if it can help you as well. If you are really struggling at the moment, if you're listening to this, please do go and talk to your family or to your friends, or go and talk to your GP, and try and get some support and some help as well. If you're based in Australia, obviously there's Lifeline that you can call. Just make sure you talk to somebody. You've only got this life once, and we know that you can get better, and it's always worth it. Even though, like Marieke said at the beginning, even if you say, I'm giving myself 1% chance over the next 10 years, at the end of the day, it will always be worth it taking those chances. Please do share the podcast with your family, with your friends, anybody you think might benefit from this information, anybody who might need this information right now as well, because they are in a tricky spot. Please do share this episode with them. I really hope this episode brought some sunshine to your soul. I'm sending love and light your way, and until next time.